In 1962, the world was moving fast. Jet travel was becoming normal. Cities were expanding. America was obsessed with chrome, size, and horsepower. But in a small factory in Germany, Porsche was doing the opposite. They were refining something quiet, something light, something that didn't shout for attention. The Porsche 356. By 1962, this car was not new. It wasn't revolutionary anymore. And that's exactly why it mattered. Because by then, Porsche wasn't experimenting. They were perfecting. The 356 had already proven itself in racing, in endurance events, and on mountain roads across Europe. It wasn't built to dominate straight lines. It was built to feel right in your hands. The engineers at Porsche believed something simple. If a car was balanced, everything else would follow. The 1962 model represented the peak of that belief. Lightweight steel body, rear-mounted air-cooled engine, no excess, no distractions. Just a machine that responded honestly. You didn't drive a 1962 Porsche 356 aggressively. You drove it precisely. The steering was unassisted. Every movement of the wheel was transmitted directly to the front tires. You felt the road surface, the camber, the imperfections. There was no filter between you and the pavement. The engine wasn't powerful by modern standards, but it didn't need to be. What it offered instead was character. A flat-four engine that hummed behind you, pushing the car forward with a sound that felt mechanical, not artificial. You could hear the fan, the valves, the air moving. Nothing was hidden. Acceleration wasn't violent. It was smooth, progressive, predictable. And because the car was light, every horsepower mattered. This wasn't about speed. It was about momentum. A 1962 356 taught you how to carry speed through corners, how to brake early, how to trust the chassis. You learned patience behind the wheel. And in return, the car rewarded you with confidence. Inside, there was nothing unnecessary. Thin pillars gave you visibility in every direction. Simple gauges sat directly in front of the driver. A large steering wheel framed the view. No screens, no alerts, no noise. Just information you actually needed. The seats were supportive but firm. They reminded you that driving was an active experience, not a passive one. You didn't sink into the car, you wore it. Every mile required engagement. And that engagement created a bond. Owners didn't talk about their 356 in terms of numbers. They talked about feelings. The way it sounded on a cool morning, the way it settled into a corner, the way it made even slow drives feel intentional. By 1962, Porsche knew something big was coming. The company was already working on what would eventually become the 911, a faster, more powerful, more modern car. But the 356 was still the heart of the brand. It carried Porsche's identity. Rear-engine layout, lightweight philosophy, driver-first design. Everything that would make Porsche legendary started here. That's why the 1962 model year matters so much. It represents the final evolution of the original idea. Not rushed, not compromised, not overdesigned. Just refined through years of feedback from real drivers and real roads. This car wasn't built for showrooms. It was built to be driven. And people drove them everywhere, across Europe, across America, through rain, snow, heat, and dust. They weren't weekend toys, they were daily companions. That's part of why so many stories surround the 356. Stories of long road trips, of rallies, of owners who kept them for decades. These cars aged with their drivers, and somehow they never lost relevance. Even today, getting into a 1962 Porsche 356 feels different. You sit lower than modern cars. You feel more exposed, more aware. The road feels closer. The steering demands attention. The brakes demand planning. The throttle demands respect. But in return, you get something rare: clarity. Modern cars isolate you from mistakes. The 356 teaches you from them. You feel weight transfer, you feel grip building and fading. You learn how the car wants to move. And once you understand it, the experience becomes almost intuitive. That's why collectors value these cars so highly. Not because they're fast, not because they're rare, but because they offer something modern cars no longer can. A pure conversation between driver and machine. No algorithms, no intervention, just physics. The 1962 Porsche 356 also represents a mindset that's disappearing. A time when engineering decisions were made by feel as much as data, when simplicity was a feature, not a limitation. Porsche didn't try to reinvent the car every year. They listened, they adjusted, they improved quietly. That philosophy built trust, and that trust built loyalty. People who owned a 356 often stayed with Porsche for life, because once you understood what the car stood for, everything else made sense. Even today, you can see its influence. The steering feel Porsche chases, the balance, the emphasis on driver involvement, it all traces back to this era, to this car, to 1962. The 356 didn't end because it failed. It ended because Porsche was ready to move forward. But they never abandoned its lessons. And that's why the car still matters. Not as a museum piece and not as an investment, but as a reminder. A reminder that driving can be simple, that performance isn't always about speed, that connection matters more than numbers. The 1962 Porsche 356 isn't loud. It doesn't beg for attention. But for those who understand it, it says everything.